The winter afternoon at the city park was quiet enough that even the rustling leaves seemed to whisper warnings no one could hear. Parents watched their children from benches, joggers passed with muffled footsteps, and a soft golden light poured through bare trees. It was peaceful, until a ripple of unease crept through the air. A small dog named Bruno, a gentle brown Labrador known to everyone for his calm nature, suddenly lifted his head sharply and stared across the park as if something invisible had disturbed the harmony of the day. His owner, Mia, didn't understand at first, but Bruno's body stiffened, his ears perked forward, and his tail froze mid-swing, his eyes locked on one spot near the playground. And that's when Mia noticed her too, a little girl sitting on a bench beside a man whose behavior seemed strangely out of place, his movements jittery, his eyes shifting rapidly, his hands clenched and trembling slightly as if he were wrestling with something inside him. Something that did not belong in the gentle calm of the park. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and helping others in need, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support truly keeps heart-touching stories alive. Bruno pulled the leash with sudden determination, something he had never done before. Mia, surprised but trusting his instincts, followed. As they drew closer, she noticed the little girl's small pink backpack dangling loosely from her shoulder. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, her feet swinging gently under the bench, tapping lightly as if she were trying to distract herself from something uncomfortable. The man beside her kept glancing around, his foot shaking restlessly. His jaw was tight, and he kept rubbing his palms against his jeans, breathing heavily yet silently. The contrast between the little girl's innocence and the man's hidden tension made the scene unsettling. Other parents hadn't noticed yet. The playground laughter muffled everything, but Bruno felt something human eyes often missed. Mia approached cautiously, pretending she was just passing by, but Bruno suddenly tugged free from her grip and trotted directly toward the girl. His tail didn't wag, his posture wasn't playful. Instead, he sat firmly in front of the little girl, eyes gentle but protective, as though placing himself between her and a danger she didn't fully understand. The man flinched slightly, startled, his body tightening like a coiled spring. He shifted further away on the bench but didn't stand. Mia apologized nervously as she reached for Bruno's collar, but as she leaned close, she sensed something else: fear. Not from the little girl, not from her, but from the man. There was a tremble in his shoulders, the kind born not from aggression, but from desperation. His eyes were red, tired, burdened, and filled with silent chaos. Bruno sensed the turmoil too. He didn't growl or bark. Instead, he gently pressed his nose against the little girl's knee, grounding her, reassuring her. For the first time, the girl's posture softened, her breathing steadied, and she reached out to pet him. Her small hand gently brushed his head, and a faint but visible calm washed over her. Bruno stayed, unwavering, like he had been born for this exact moment. Mia observed the scene deeply. Something was not right, but not in the way she first assumed. The man looked distressed, not dangerous, but the mismatch between his internal chaos and the presence of the child made her stomach twist. She asked the girl if everything was okay, but the girl only shrugged softly, gripping the straps of her backpack. The man exhaled shakily, covering his face for a moment, as though fighting back an emotional storm. His fingers trembled uncontrollably, and he whispered something she couldn't hear. Bruno stepped closer to him, sniffing his knee, then looking up with soft eyes that saw beyond what humans noticed. The man's shoulders collapsed slightly as if the dog's simple compassion had pierced right through the fog he was lost in. He muttered something again, and this time Mia heard a few broken words, words soaked in pain, words that told a story of someone on the edge, someone who felt unseen, someone who had been carrying too much too alone. And yet, even then, he made no move toward the child. Instead, his trembling hand rose slowly to his forehead, covering his eyes, as though ashamed of what he had become in the eyes of the world. The little girl watched him with innocent confusion rather than fear. She didn't understand the complexity of adult suffering, the unbearable weight that sometimes pushes people to the brink. Mia gently sat on the other side of the girl, creating a protective but non-threatening space. The man seemed to shrink into himself, his breathing uneven, but Bruno sat directly between them all, an emotional bridge holding fragile pieces of a moment together. The dog's quiet presence softened something in the man. He attempted to sit straighter, as if trying not to appear as broken as he felt. After a long minute, the man finally spoke in a choked voice. He explained that he wasn't related to the girl. He hadn't taken her or approached her intentionally. In fact, she had sat beside him on her own when all the benches were full, smiling politely the way children do without realizing the turmoil of strangers. He insisted he meant no harm. He had just lost his job that morning, his home 2 weeks earlier, his family months before that. Everything seemed to crumble faster than he could rebuild. He wasn't thinking clearly. He had been sitting there trying not to break down in public, trying to hold himself together so no one would judge him for being a grown man with nowhere else to go. The girl nodded softly, confirming his story. She told me she felt sad seeing the man cry quietly earlier, so she sat beside him because he looked like he needed someone to sit with him. That single sentence pierced straight through the tension. Mia felt her heart tighten. Bruno nuzzled the man's leg again, offering silent support, as if saying that broken people weren't to be feared. They were to be understood, helped, held with compassion rather than pushed away. The man covered his face again, ashamed of his vulnerability, but Bruno gently placed a paw on his knee. The man froze, then clenched his jaw before finally letting out a deep, shuddering breath. The walls around him cracked open. Tears slipped through the cracks, and for the first time in months he allowed anyone to see the truth behind the strange, trembling facade. He wasn't dangerous, he was drowning. The girl leaned closer to Mia, whispering that the man needed help. Something about the purity of her words, her instinctive compassion, transformed the entire moment. Mia realized that her initial fear wasn't wrong. Strange behavior in public always demands caution, but sometimes the danger isn't a person hurting others. Sometimes it's a person hurting silently inside themselves. She offered to call someone for him, or help him find a shelter, or connect with resources. The man nodded painfully, swallowing back sobs. Bruno stayed by his side, tail finally swaying with gentle reassurance. And in that moment, a fragile, unexpected bond formed. A dog reaching a heart no human had managed to touch. A child offering kindness when adults looked away, and a stranger finding hope in the most unlikely pair. Mia spent the next hour helping him contact a support line, arranging a temporary shelter, and ensuring he wasn't alone. The girl waited beside them, playing with Bruno, completely unaware that she had been the catalyst for something incredible. Her innocent decision to sit beside a hurting stranger had changed the course of his life. A single small act of kindness had prevented something unthinkable. When the man finally stood to leave, supported and no longer shaking, he knelt beside Bruno and pressed a trembling hand to his soft fur. The dog licked his fingers gently, offering one last reminder that compassion, sometimes from unexpected places, is enough to pull someone back from the edge. As he walked away toward the shelter van that arrived to pick him up, he looked back once more, eyes filled not with despair but with gratitude. The girl waved with both hands, smiling brightly. Bruno barked softly, tail wagging like a farewell blessing. And Mia felt a powerful truth settle inside her, that sometimes heroes come in small forms. Sometimes the bravest hearts belong to children. Sometimes the most healing touch comes from a dog who understands pain deeper than words. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more meaningful, life-changing stories to the world. Before the ending, here's a special request. Please comment below. Kindness saves lives. As the sun began to set, casting warm amber light across the park, Mia watched the little girl skip toward her mother, who had returned from a nearby stall, unaware of the small miracle her daughter had sparked. Bruno nudged Mia's hand, and she stroked his head lovingly. She knew that today had been a reminder for everyone that even in a world full of noise, fear, and uncertainty, compassion still mattered, kindness still mattered. And sometimes, All it takes to save a life is to simply sit beside someone who looks like they need it, and a dog who knows exactly what to do next.